Now, shouldn't we ask ourselves why we're even celebrating 10 years? The reality is, global statistics will tell you 7 out of every 10 new businesses in the world will die by the 3rd year. They tend not to survive. In the best scenario case, you would have 50% in some climes. But no matter where it is in the world, you will tend to lose about 7 out of every 10. So when a business survives, especially in our country, and that's not because there aren't many great things about our country, because part of the reason why we're so entrepreneurially rich is because there's so many opportunities that are still lying on the streets and need a lot of courageous minds to pick them up, walk through them, work out solutions that will solve the problems of other people and make them willing to pay you for delivering the service. Traditionally, a lot of companies used to have in-house company secretaries to serve them because we always thought that was the easiest thing. You could trust your company secretary to keep corporate confidentialities and manage resources. I want you to understand the nature of the difficulty of the work that BC does and the nature of her person and why she can succeed in this business. The discipline that is required to be the repertoire of corporate information for a lot of organizations and be entrusted with it speaks to the character of the leadership and of the institution that is built. Because one of the easiest things to do with the nature of the work that they do is to be porous and mismanage corporate information of multiple organizations and cross-fertilize information in a way that you do damage to the institutions. And obviously, once you do that once or twice, your business is on its way out because reputation will destroy you. So in our country, where there are many things to contend with, to build systematically, structurally, and continue to grow is because you're focused on what your end game is. And in doing that, it also means you're disciplined enough to apply the tools that are necessary to find the right human capital, which is part of what our Dr. Usman acceded to in terms of the quality of the manpower at DCSL. So finding the right kind of people to work in your organization is also about you, because you can employ people on day one. And once they come in, after 12 months, 14 months, they look around and say, I'm out of here. This is not the place for me. Why? There's no career path. If leadership cannot be trusted, if you can't see the direction that the company is going, and you cannot see the credibility that is involved in it. But obviously, that has not been a DCSL problem. Otherwise, if you as a board invite them to be your company secretaries, and today some people come to the meeting, the next time I remember being on a board where maybe we had 2-3 meetings, we had a separate team by a different company, not DCSL. And sometime later, they had another team. By the time you had changes of team, you knew that company was not the right company to manage those kind of affairs. Because if they can't retain their own human capital, then they cannot serve you properly for the long term, because it's an area where you like to trust. Now, how do you build sustainably in Nigeria? First, you have to first decide that Nigeria is worth fighting for. You have to believe in Nigeria as a country to make the investment that is necessary to build for the long term within it. To decide that to Japa and have to Jakpada is not an option. As many people are finding out, people sold houses, took loans, went into debt to go and search for the gold that didn't exist, and soon found out that the cold weather is worse than the sun. That it's better to be hot than to be cold. And that in Nigeria, if you are hungry and I visit BC's house, I will eat breakfast in the morning. If I visit the Ajayis, there will be lunch. If I visit Dr. Usman's house, there will be dinner. You can get fed on a full day in Nigeria. And you don't even have to do that. Just go to the parties. You know, if you move from one party from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you'll be fed and you can take extras home. And then when you think of what you need in your house, sit down long enough at the parties to shop for the gifts. You can get everything that you need in your kitchen or anywhere in your house. And so you can be comfortable. So you have to be a believer in Nigeria to build a business in Nigeria. And whilst Nigeria challenges us, the reality is anyone that builds and builds for the long term in Nigeria has an innovative mind. Why? Because every time you go to bed at night, you can expect something might happen in the morning. And when it does, do you throw your hands up and give up? Or do you sit down, reset yourself, and rethink the situation and work out what to do next? If DCSL is still here after 10 years, it means that they've had many moments of reinventing and re-strategizing and re-innovating. Because in this country, businesses cannot last time. In my 60 years of life, my business will be 35 years in January. And I haven't started in Nigeria in my mid-20s with a business in manufacturing, which everybody thought was madness. I think the only great thing I had for me was my dad. My father is a firm believer in allowing the adventures of his children, and me being the most adventurous. As he fondly said at one point when I went to take a loan, that my father did not discourage me, but I found out later I told everybody, Mobi, you know. For those who do not speak Yoruba, it means I have given birth to this one. And he just waited and said, perchance anything goes wrong, he will sell his house and go and pay the debt. But he did not tell me don't. And he waited to see how. But as God would help me, 15 months after, I had paid off that unimaginable loan that I took at such an early age because my business just needed machineries that there was no other way for me to get it. And I got this offer. The interest rate was something to die for. It was ridiculous, but I had to do what was necessary to move the business to the next stage. If DCSL is 10 years old, it's because they've had moments where they've had to work against the odds and find solutions that put them over the odds in order to remain and to keep standing. And that's for every business in Nigeria that served its time. Because one way or the other, we survive by making sure that we survive. What about our values? If you want to build a business and build for the long term, you have to decide who you're going to be. And I know that we can have a debate about this because many people think, oh, you can't survive in Nigeria if you don't become something else, a different kind of animal. But I dare to say that, you know, the wrong animals survive for a season. But when the right season comes, they get crushed. And we can see it, and we see it every day. But you know, the ones who choose to build right, there might be seasons where they seem oppressed. There might be seasons when they seem like they're crushed. But because what is right will always be right in all seasons, no matter how the scenario looks, when the tides turn, you will be standing. And so, if I take the privilege and the right of 35 years of being in the manufacturing sector, apart from my multiple corporate lives and some of my fights that are public and open, I know one thing. Doing the right thing is the right thing to do. And standing with the right thing, no matter the cost, ultimately is your right thing to do. Because when the seasons come and go and things correct themselves, the truth will always remain the truth. And therefore, if DSL has survived for 10 years, but intends to survive longer, no matter what counsel you receive, the things you've done right that got you here, never trade them off. Because some things are not tradable. And if as a country we want to build institutions for the longest term, we're going to have to learn to build institutions that will last. And when we're building institutions that will last, it won't be about BC. It just means BC is the forerunner. She might initiate it. It means it won't be about Dr. Ajayi and the Bridge Clinic or the hospital or whatever should survive beyond him. The institution should be built in a way that the promoters and the builders on day one are not the ones who die building it. Because if you die building it, it will die when you die. So the question to ask ourselves is, what are we doing? Building organizations to feed or building institutions to last? If we want institutions to last and work, then we have to build them on the right values. We have to make sure we set the right parameters. We must engage the right minds and the right people. We must empower the right people within our systems to do the right things within the institution. We must be master at delegation. You can't delegate without empowering. We must delegate to people, but we must also empower them to do what we do. So whilst BC gets every email that goes, I truly hope that she only gets it. She doesn't have to act on them. Because if she doesn't have to act on every email, it means her people are doing their job and that they got the team right from the onset. Because truly, for where they're going, it will be impossible for her to be the one to make every email right. Then there's a problem. And that goes for all of us. I like to point to some of our great institutions we've built in this country in the past. I mean, when I think of like being young and driving on, I'm from Ibadan, but we live in Lagos. And so my father taking us on holidays to my grandmother in Ibadan. You're going to drive through the Japa roads to go to Ibadan. And you see these Odutola tires, but Odutola rubber plantation on the road. They endure miles, and you wonder how one person controls so much. Nigerian entrepreneurs of old. If you go to Harvard, they have a case on the Odutola industry. Extremely brilliant entrepreneurs of their generation. He outstanding amongst many like him. They built great institutions, but every single one of them died with them. The question we need to ask ourselves, why? Because they were supermen. But do supermen exist? No, they don't. If we want to build organizations, we cannot be supermen. We must build super organizations that men serve for a season and a time, but the organization must live beyond them. There were men who had people working for them, men they instructed on what to do, but men that did not allow those who worked for them to think about what to do. So when they left, everybody else didn't know what to do because everything was about them. It was in them. They carried the knowledge of the institution, the connectivity of the institution, and the power of the institution. For Nigeria to continue to build institutions that will last, the DNA of the entrepreneurs of this generation must be different. We must be able to build with pride, but we must also have the pride of transition. And that's why it was such a beautiful thing to watch to be at Bode Augusto's tribute night on Tuesday. I can see the MD of Augusto & Co. there and watch in 30 years or 31 years of Augusto & Co. Mr. Adeleko is the third CEO of Augusto & Co. because Bode himself exited at the right time, transited to Vivian Shobo, who was CEO for many years as well. And Vivian Shobo, still very young and able, if you know her, you know that, transited to her, third generation, and they went on to do other things with themselves, but the institution remains. And now, Bode is gone permanently, but Augusto & Co. remains. Why? Because a brilliant entrepreneur didn't say, I'm the most brilliant person in the room, and therefore, if I go, Augusto & Co. will die, even though it bears his name. But the company has proven it will remain. So I challenge all of us who are building institutions that as we celebrate the landmark of a great institution that BC and her team are building, the reality is the institution is bigger than the individuals, and it should. I had made up my mind at 31 that at 50 I didn't want to be at the center of my business. So when I was 48, I asked a consulting firm to come and consolidate the business into a group, find its officers, and keep me on the outside as a customer and a strategist for the company. I didn't know some of the things that will come after, but I set myself free because one thing I told myself is if my business dies when I die, I wasted my life. And considering all of my life from my 20s had been invested in this, I didn't want to waste it. So I wanted to see my business in my lifetime. If things go wrong, I could go in and still correct. But I didn't want to jump in. And I'm still on the outside. And sometimes things really go wrong. But you know one thing I've refused is the temptation to jump back in. But to continue to build others so they can build the institution further. Then it would have been worth the years of my life that was put into it. I'm proud of what DCSL has done. And many amazing Nigerian entrepreneurs. We're a nation that is blessed, filled with people with passion, with fire, with innovation, with ability to create. Against the odds that we face in this country, we continue to create. And you know why it's important. If you've read the news in the last few months, consider how many multinationals have either left or on their way out. That is the truth. Who is not going to leave? Us. Where are we going? So we have to make our companies work. But guess what? Every foreign company that comes in and leaves an open door, leaves an opportunity. They have proven the market. They have opened it up. They leave an opportunity for a Nigerian who knows what they're doing to move into it. And in some cases, it's people who have worked for them who move into some of those opportunities in stages. So yes, we have work to do, but we have to do it right. And what DCSL represents for us today is 10 years. It's not a long time, but it's long enough to prove the concept, to build on it, and to show the path to a long run. And to say, it's tough, it's difficult, it's challenging, but we are Nigerians. We can do this. I'm going to wrap just 1 minute with this. I remember in 2004, when the government had a change of policy that affected my industry. And one of my business partners, they were Spanish. And at that point, I was in business school in Barcelona. And this Spanish guy came from Bilbao to Barcelona to come and see me, just to ask me a question. Tell me, Ibukun, your government changed policy, it affected your business, and you've already turned around, and you're moving on, and you have a new strategy of how you're moving your business forward. How? I smiled and looked at him. I'm a Nigerian. I go to bed every night knowing I could wake up to a surprise tomorrow. But I also know that whatever the surprise is, we can navigate it. And that's who we are. That's what we do well. Congratulations to DCS. Have a joyful evening. Thank you.